noise!
Hello and welcome to another edition of Truth and Rhythm, brought to you by funkinstuff.net. This is the interview show that gets deep in the pocket with contemporary music's foremost masters of the groove. I'm your host, Scott Dr. Jigs Goldfine, musicologist and author of Everything's on the One, the First Guide to Funk. If you don't have your copy, get on over to Amazon and pick one up. You'll be so glad you did. Whether you're watching the video version of this at funkinstuff.net or on YouTube, or listening to the audio-only podcast version from providers like iTunes and Spotify, as always, I thank you so much for your continued interest and support in the show. Speaking of which, if you haven't already done so, subscribe to the Funk and Stuff channel on YouTube. That's where Truth and Rhythm lives. All kinds of goodies. You'll get early premieres, and it's all free, so make sure you sign up. Tell a friend, tell family. Also, get your official Truth and Rhythm and Funk and Stuff gear at the funkinstuff.net store. Cool stuff like I'm wearing right here. Truth and Rhythm shirts. Show your support and love of the show and also the musicians and the music that they represent. Also want to give a shout out to the Funk Exhibition Center and Hall of Fame in Dayton, Ohio, of which I'm very proud to be an official funk ambassador. Go to thefunkcenter.org to learn more and keep the funk alive. And now, with all that, it's time to get on with the show. Enjoy. I'm pleased to welcome to the Truth and Rhythm Mothership, Alan Evans, co-founding drummer, composer, singer, and producer of the fantastic funk, jazz, soul, groove trio Soulive. Along with his keyboardist brother, Neil Evans, and guitarist, Eric Krasno. Since the group's founding in the late 1990s, Soulive has released more than a dozen albums chock full of deep rhythmic and improvisational sonic explorations, with stylistic nods to the Headhunters, Crusaders, Meters, the JB, Stevie Wonder, and other luminaries. The band has brought salvation to those hungry for jam sessions by talented players more interested in musicality than radio or chart success. Al, thank you for joining the show.
Hey, thank you. I dig the intro, man.
I do what I can. I got to do justice, right?
Oh, man, we all do what we can. So, yeah, I hear you.
Thank you so much for joining the show. And where are you coming to us from?
I'm coming to you from the lovely Western Massachusetts. I'm at my studio, my recording studio in Irving, Massachusetts, which is about 20 minutes from my house. So,
okay.
Yeah.
And is that where you're from originally?
No, originally from Buffalo, New York.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
But we've been here 20 years, probably close to 21 years now. So,
okay.
Time flies.
Yeah, I would say that's an adopted home at this point for sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, how are you doing this year? Crazy times?
To be quite honest with you, I'm doing great.
Okay.
I'm doing great, man. So we all know how this year basically started. I played my last live show in February. And I just, so after we went into, we started going to lockdown mode, I was out walking with my wife, and where we live, we're very lucky in that we can go for, especially when this all started, we were going on, we were doing about 6-10 miles a day walking, most of the time we'd run into see nobody. We're like out in the country. So it's it's really nice that we had that opportunity. But anyway, so at the beginning of it, we were out walking, and I was telling her, there's been times in the past, especially during the years of Soulive, all of a sudden I'd find myself, we'd say, oh, we're going to take like a year off from touring, or 6 months, a year, whatever it may be. And I'd say, and then all of a sudden, next thing I knew, I was on a tour bus or in a van or on an airplane again. I'm like, what the hell? What just happened?
Mm-hmm.
What did I do with my time? And so I said at the beginning of this, I don't know how long, we were going to be in this state of, whatever. But what I'm not going to say is at the end of it that I didn't accomplish anything, So I've been so busy on many fronts. I have my record label, so we've been cranking out music. Me just personally as a writer and musician, I've been busy, but also as a studio engineer, obviously a lot of people have all of a sudden become like overnight engineers, a lot of musicians. So I've been doing a lot of mixing and, production for people. I'm telling you, I finally, just in the past few weeks, I've started to take weekends off. I've been so busy. It's been nuts. So that's on the work side of things. Personally, I've been good. Obviously, there were definitely some ups and downs, just in terms of, things going on in the world and me and how I process them. But overall, man, I've been really good. I mean, we're all been living through unprecedented times. So I feel that we all have to kind of let ourselves, we have to go easy on ourselves. Of course there's going to be, people are going to get depressed. There's a whole range of emotions that we're all dealing with. So you have to, for me, it's just about recognizing those. It's like, okay, I'm feeling, I'm a little bummed out, whatever. Okay, it's cool. Just step back, relax, breathe. And yeah, but overall, I've been really good. So thank you for asking.
Glad to hear it, Al. And, I think I've talked to a lot of musicians who, it's like two different sides of the spectrum. If you're okay financially, then this period has been sort of like a reprieve for many and, an opportunity to, recharge and maybe, record some new things and take a break from the road and that kind of thing. Those that don't have that nest egg, it's been extremely rough. So, yeah.
Well, it definitely. I mean, so for me, obviously, for some time now, I haven't toured as much as, my touring days have definitely kind of, I wouldn't say dwindled, but it's a little more selective. And over the past, I'd say almost 10 years, I've been more of my time spent has been in the studio, as engineering for myself and others. So that side of things, it wasn't like the funny thing about it actually is that Neil was out with Jack White a couple of years ago now, so we weren't touring at all. That was right after we recorded our last was Cinematics, and then literally as soon as that happened, Neil was in the studio with Jack, and then got called to go out on the road, and then that was it. Neil was gone. So after the Jack gig ended with for Neil, he wanted some time off because it was like some straight up rock star travel. I mean, he was all over the world. Like I rarely talked to him actually, but then we did Bowl Live And then we had some shows lined up for the spring and summer of 2020. So it's kind of crazy. Like, we hadn't gigged in a while, and then we were kind of getting some things lined up, and then all this kind of happened. But with that said, yeah, I already had other things going on, and luckily I've been able to kind of continue. Obviously, my studio, people coming and recording in my studio, like, came to a grinding halt. Obviously, a lot of people who come to my studio travel from other parts of the country or other parts of the world, so that stopped. Well, I was still working, but I've said to people, and some people find this a little strange, in that I've said that the way I've been thinking is I've prepared myself to never play a live show again. Now, with that said, people are like, "What are you talking about?" For me, it's a mental state. It's how I'm preparing mentally. I'm lucky enough that when we go back to playing shows, I'll probably want to sit down and kind of get the calluses back going, a few weeks beforehand. But I'm able to play. I'm a person, if we play some Soulive shows, we'll jump right back in it. We've taken time off before. There'll be a little dust here. We'll jump back in it. But more importantly for me, it's like I don't focus on the past or what isn't. For me, it's like, okay, this is what's happening right now. I need to, not even need to, I want to adapt to it. And I definitely know a lot of people who are having a hard time. Some people are having a hard time letting go of the fact that, yeah, there's no gigs, man, and yeah, it sucks, but I'm not going to allow myself to get into a negative space because I can't play a show. It's like, okay, man, like, I just have to do something else. I have a family. That comes, they come first. So I need to, I just have to pivot. I have to adapt to the situation. Mm-hmm. With that said, you mentioned, musicians, some are doing, better in this time than others. I've spoken to a lot of friends who work in the music industry, tour managers or lighting, people, like, and I'm telling you, those people are hurting.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I spoke to some people who were like, before this, they were tour managing 3 or 4 different, big acts, and they're constantly, and then all that went away. And it's like, yeah, what are you doing now? Like, I'm lucky. I have the studio. I have, this ability to stay. I've been able to be productive and keep food on the table and and the roof over our head. It's tough for a lot of people, like, in our industry. So it's like it's not just the musicians, and that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And
I feel for them.
Definitely. So, Al, let's rewind it back to a little more innocent days when everything was in front of you. And, we had no idea that, this kind of thing would be ahead. But, how did you first get into drums, and what was it like, in the Evans household with you and Neil?
Well, I have no recollection of beginning my early days of playing drums. My mother, who recently confirmed this, because I was speaking with someone else on this, but I started playing drums when I was 9 months old. So obviously there were drums in the house, but it was a lot of music in the house. I had no memory of starting drum. I remember when I started playing guitar, I was 11 years old. So I remember that. But drums, I mean, I was playing drums really before I could speak. So in a way, like that was kind of like, it's like my first language, you know. For a long time, it was definitely easier for me to communicate through music than it was through just spoken word, you know. But growing up, there was a lot of music in the house. Our father, I'll say, was a fantastic drummer. He wasn't a professional musician, but wow, I mean, he could play. I learned a lot from it. I didn't really study drums or music in general, really, but he gave us so many lessons. So one, this is probably one I've talked about this before, and I'll continue to do so because it's so important. When we were younger, especially Neil and myself, there were 4 of us in the household. Neil and our sister Rachel and youngest sister Rebecca. But Neil and I were the ones playing music, you know. But we all listened to a lot of music growing up. Anyway, in our house, there was a front room with just big windows on 3 sides, and that was the TV room, right? And then next to that was the living room where the stereo was, and then the rest of the house continued from there. So many times my father would be, when we were like toddlers or when we were very young, my father would be in there listening to, you know, he had his stereo, all the records, and he'd be listening to some music. And all Neil and I wanted to do is go watch cartoons. But we heard the music and we're like, oh man, this is going to be a longer process, because as we were walking through, my dad would say, hey, come over here, sit down, check this out. And he'd sit us down and he'd say, who's playing saxophone? Who's playing trumpet? Who's playing bass? Who's playing drums? Who's playing piano? And, you know, we'd sit there. It's like, oh, that's, that's Oscar Peterson. No, that's so-and-so, you know, like, and so from a very young age, it was, without us even knowing it, it was a really interesting form of ear training, in that we were being taught to really listen to the voice of the instrumentalists or the musicians, their tone, their phrasing, the songs themselves, and probably most importantly, how they work together as a band. So over time, obviously Neil and I got better at it. But it took a very long time for me to understand the importance of what he was doing. I'm not really sure it was a conscious effort on his part of what he was doing. It was just fun, you know, like, but it really made us the musicians who we are today, you know. So that's just like one example of like something that would go on in the house, how music was such a large part of our upbringing, you know. It was just a lot of, it was just always fun. It was always fun. Like I said, I started playing drums when I was really young, and there was never a point where my parents were like, all right, you have to go and practice. Like, that was never if we practice is because we wanted to. And again, it wasn't like I'm going to practice this. It was just like we were just playing music. We were just getting better all the time. So, I mean, by the time I was 11 years old, 11, 12, I was like gigging, like playing out in clubs and, you know, and then all of a sudden I'm 46 and still doing it. Like and that's the thing. I never made the decision like I'm going to be a musician. It was just like,
just rolled with it.
I was just doing it. It's just, you know, it's kind of crazy.
What's the age difference between you two?
Basically 2 years. Yeah. Neil's 44, 46. So Yeah, I don't know when that happened, but it did.
Yeah. It flies by for sure. So were you guys into, jazz initially, or were you into the music of the day, or what was?
Oh, well, it was everything. So my father had a huge jazz collection, classical, opera, but also like some good soul records. I mean, like he had the Joe Cocker and the Mad Dogs and Englishmen like double LP when I was growing up. When we were young, I remember that documentary, the original, the Mad Dogs and Englishmen movie was on PBS, and we like watched it together. Like I was like, probably 6 or 7 years old. And I was like, wow, this is great. And then it wasn't until like years later I watched it as an adult. I'm like, holy shit, I can't believe my parents like let us watch this. Well, we were just like too young to even know, like, everyone, it was so over our head. Yeah. But we were just like all about the music, But so there's that side of it. Then we have an older brother, who Rod is, if I'm 46, so Rod's what, 60 mid 60s now. And so Rod was a DJ back in the 70s. He like DJ'd at this club in Buffalo, Freedom Train. Like this is like a perfect name, right? So Rod is still to this day. He's like a stereo. Stereophile. You know what I mean? Like he's like got incredible equipment, and his music collection is just ridiculous. So we had that side of things where he was hipping us to like, funk, rock, reggae, like all that stuff that he was listening to. And I mean, I remember when Off the Wall came out, because he bought it. I mean, that was what, Off the Wall, 78, 79? Yeah. 79, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I remember that. I remember the first time I listened to Headhunters. I was like probably 4 or 5 years old, Actually, I have a quadraphonic copy of Headhunters.
I remember that. Yeah, it came out in quad.
Man. Yeah. Yep. So I grew up with all that stuff. You know what I'm saying? And then obviously, as Neil and I were growing up, obviously we were like listening to just the music that was going on at the time. You know what I mean? Like I still have the very first vinyl I purchased with my own money, which was Men at Work, Business as Usual. Like and the only reason why I bought that album, I went to the record store back in Buffalo. It was called Record Theater. And I walked in, we're just like kind of walking around, and I just remember looking at the album cover. I'm like, wow, that looks really cool. And I just bought it,
1982?
That's when it was new. It was brand new. That's when it first came out.
82?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That was and I still have that copy. Still have it. So then obviously we got, as we got older, there was like, I was like listening to, all kinds of stuff, man, and that was the thing, like with my parents, like I said, we listened to jazz, opera, and just all kinds of stuff. But as we came into our own and started listening to, rap, before they were like calling it hip hop, back when it was rap, or like we were listening to like Suicidal Tendencies or like Fishbone or Bad Brains, all this kind of stuff. Like, I got huge into Hendrix and all this stuff. My parents, if they never shut anything down, no matter what like I said, we were like listening to some Suicidal Tendencies, like we were listening to that stuff loud, like, and it was never like, oh, you can't listen to that, they may not have dug it, it may not be their thing, but nothing was like, out of bounds, it's just exploring music. So it was a beautiful thing.
And all that definitely courses through your music and a lot of the repertoire that you guys have chosen through the years. Who are some of your specific drum influences, would you say?
Okay, well, probably it's easier for me to kind of go back in time when I'd say Elvin Jones, Tony Williams, Mitch Mitchell, Clyde Stubblefield. Yeah, I mean, there's so many, but there was definitely a time, Buddy Miles. I mean, there's so many, but I'd say those have kind of really. I remember those as those individuals kind of waking something up in me, like obviously over time that you start to hear differently, or I'm kind of influenced by everything now, but those early on, those were probably people that if I hadn't heard those people or wanted to be like them at a certain time, I wouldn't be here today, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
And was there someone else you were going to add, or?
Well, the thing for me, people always find this a little odd when I say it's like I never really considered myself a drummer. I play drums, but I know people who definitely focused on drums. You know what I mean? Like I mean, honestly, I could go. I have at this point. Like I could go months, 6 months without playing drums. And I'm like, okay, that's cool, whatever, no big deal. Like I play my guitar. I play other instruments. It's all just music to me. So with that said, I feel that for me, the biggest influences now when I'm able to look back, I guess, the drummers I really dig most were a part of a band, like something, you know what I mean? It was like for me, like, I don't like drum solos. I should say I don't like taking drum solos. Like I can appreciate some, whatever. But man, if I never play another drum solo in my life, I'm totally fine.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
about the collective.
Role, yeah, exactly. It's about playing the song. That's all. That's all it comes down to. It's the song. So again, going back to when you look at the drummers that have influenced me the most, it wasn't just their drumming, it was it was the music they were playing, it was the people they were playing with, how they interacted, so yeah, I guess that's what I'm drawn to, I guess, so.
And it's right in line, I think, with, you have a relatively, basic setup that you use for your drumming. You don't go with the big, extravagant.
No. I had my time, never on stage, and everyone's lucky. I've definitely set up my, when I was way into Mahavishnu, and I'd set up my big Billy Cobham, double kick drum and all that kind of stuff. I did that in the privacy of my own studio with no one listening, just for fun, just to try it, But now I always joke. I said anything more than I have just confuses me, So I'm good, I don't need a lot. Actually, I have usually just a rack tom and a floor tom, but. Dude, when there's been plenty of shows where we would fly in somewhere or whatever, and there's a drum set that's not that happening. Like I'm always, hey, give me a snare drum, bass drum, and a hi-hat, and maybe a cymbal. I'm good. I don't need any of that other stuff. I'm actually more excited with less.
Mm-hmm.
So, Yeah.
Makes it easier to be your own roadie, that's for sure.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So, Al, when did you and Neil first, start really performing in front of people, and what preceded Soulive?
Ooh, okay. Well, so I'd say, like I said, my earliest memories of playing a show with Neil, we were in the jazz band. So I was probably about fifth or sixth grade, somewhere in there. And we were part of this jazz band at school. The jazz band, concert band, jazz band, marching band. But there was also a jazz combo that, and we would do little things. So it was Neil was playing vibes. I was playing drums. We had a bass player, pianist, saxophone, and maybe trumpet. But anyway, we would get the jazz combo at our school would get hired to do like these school these events for, say, like there would be like some administrators luncheon or something like that, and we'd be off in the corner just playing like Girl from Ipanema and whatever, stuff like that. And then I don't know if this is totally true, but one of the cats in the band was like, "Man, I think the band, so there was a band director as well, but he would just be kind of like talking with people, and we're just playing the music, right?" I was like, "I think he's getting like paid. I think he's getting paid for these." Like all of a sudden it got a little gray. All of a sudden we were doing these. I was like, "Man, well, we should just start doing gigs on our own, So we started like playing like parties for people and doing jazz, and then all of a sudden it would kind of morph into like funk and rock as the night went on or whatever. But that was like, yeah, I mean, that was like, Neil was probably fifth grade at that point, fifth, sixth grade. So I was like seventh, eighth grade, whatever, doing that. But then we also were like, we would be gigging at night, like in different clubs and things like that. So that was a long time ago. So the sax player in this combo, my good friend Joshua Levitt, hit me up so at one point I stopped playing drums. I was like really playing guitar. So Neil and I had a band. We had a couple of bands where he was playing drums, I was playing guitar, and we had a bass player. We were like doing like parties and whatever, recording stuff. It was all like kind of rock stuff, So anyway, Joshua hit me up one day. He says, "Hey man, so I'm playing sax in." He was in high school, but he was playing saxophone in the jazz band at Buffalo State College. And he's like, "I met this guitarist. I think we should get together and do some playing." I was like, "Man, I'm not even playing drums anymore. I'm playing guitar." He's like, "Well, I think you'd like this guy, so whatever." So I was like, "All right, whatever." After weeks of him trying to get me to agree, I said, "All right, cool, whatever." So he's like, we're going over to Buff State to pick this dude up from his dorm. And as we're pulling up, he's like, "Oh man, dude, there's one thing I want to tell you. He's bald." I'm like, "All right." He's like, "Well, I just wanted to make sure, like, I didn't want you to think he was a skinhead." So I'm kind of dating myself now, because that was kind of like the thing, back then. There were like, fake skinheads and some real skinheads, like kind of weird stuff going on, So he's like, "I just want to make sure you didn't freak out, And I was like, "All right, no, I'm cool, man, So it ended up being Peter Prince, so that was the beginning of a band called The Groove, which later became Moon Boot Lover, which I toured with quite a bit with Neil. And I mean, we did a lot of touring in the early 90s. And this is before Soulive. But from that point, it was kind of crazy. So I guess I was a sophomore in high school when that band started. So Peter would have been a sophomore in college. So when he graduated college, I was graduating high school. And this was actually one point where I had to make a decision. He wasn't from Buffalo. He was just like, all right, I'm just going to split. And so are we going to continue to do this band? I didn't really know. I mean, we were like, and at that point, we were a big fish in a small pond in Buffalo. And there was us, the Groove, before, and then we changed our name when we left Buffalo. But there was the Groove. There was a band called Mo. Who I don't know if you've heard of Mo.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So Mo, and the Groove, or which later became Moon Boot Lover, all started out in Buffalo at that time. And we were just gigging a lot, and then it was just time for all of us to just move on. So then I moved to New York City, was living in Brooklyn, and we were just, touring hard, man, so that ended. Neil and I, so I obviously graduated before Neil. So I split, and Neil was going to go to Rutgers to study with, who was he going to study with? I can't remember. Famous jazz pianist, right? So he was all set. He was going to Rutgers. And I called him up one day. I'm like, hey, man, what's going on? It's like, man, you should really, you should come out on the road with us. I can't believe my parents didn't kill me. And so all of a sudden Neil is moving out to Woodstock, New York, where we were living then, and then we were on the road, and then we did that until 96. Then I took some time off, and then after that I found myself out in San Diego playing with the Great Boy All-Stars and the first iteration of the Carl Denson's Tiny Universe. Mm-hmm. And did that up until that was 98, 97, 98. And then I was done with that, and then started Soulive in 99. So.
Wow. Thanks for that history, Al. Yeah.
So there's another interesting thing though. So I mentioned the band The Groove back in Buffalo. So Neil was in The Groove back then. So he was 8th grade or something like that, playing keys. And we had bass, drums, guitar, saxophone, and keyboards. And like I said, we were doing really well. And we were going out on the road and stuff like that and come back. And it's kind of amazing I finished high school at all, but I did. Anyway, one night, I should say, we had a big sold out show. We were headlining in Buffalo at this place called the Cabaret. And Pete and we were like Spinal Tap with bass players, man. I'm telling you, I don't even know how many bass players that band had. But anyway, so Pete was like, all right, I'm going to go over to Buff State and grab the bass player who was playing with us at the time. This gospel kind of dude. He had 12 siblings. They were all musical or whatever. I don't remember his name. Anyway, so Pete goes over to school to pick him up. Neil and I are setting up, getting everything ready at the club. People start to come in, the place is, getting packed. And then Pete shows up, comes back about 20 minutes later. And he's like, he's, we're like, well, where is he? He's like, yeah, he's not coming. We're like, what are you talking about? We thought he's pulling our leg. We go outside, he's like, hey, quit the band. So Neil and I walk outside, we're looking around this dude is messing with us. He's like, no, dude, quit the band. So that night was the first night. So we were the place was packed. It was sold out. Neil took over, left hand bass. Like I said, he was 8th grade. I think it was 8th grade, something like that, and that was it, So that's kind of how it all started with Neil. Now with that said, Neil had always, that wasn't the first time he did it, but he always had that mind of playing. That's just how he played, he just knew all the bass lines of stuff, but man, you talk about just, that was crazy. And he rocked the entire show. And then after that, it was well, why do we need a bass player? It's we got him. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting how that evolved, and you know, necessity being the mother of invention. You know,
there you go. Exactly.
Yeah. Wow.
Yep.
And how'd you come up with the name Soulive?
Interesting. Okay, so Neil and I had another group, another group that I didn't mention yet, called the Elements, and this was like a hip hop group. So I was playing drums and recording everything. Neil was playing keys, and then we had an MC, like our other brother, a brother from another mother, for real, Idris Wajid, who is an amazing artist, visual artist, musical artist. So anyway, when we were off the road with Moonboot Lover, Neil and I would travel back to Buffalo, and we'd every August, and then we'd set up a studio at my parents' house down in the basement, and we would record with Idris, and we recorded like 3 or 4 albums or something like that over the years. One of the songs was actually Neil and I doing some vocals with kind of like this back and forth thing, just like basically just talking stuff over this track, you know, like a kind of interlude thing. And for whatever reason, Neil just said soul. He said, so, I said live soul, and then he said soul live. Oh, and then I said live soul, and we were just going back and forth, just talking, you know. And we ended up calling that album Soulive, and then that ended up becoming my recording studio name. Now this is 95, I think it was. So when I was out in San Diego years later, decided to leave Carl and the Great Boy All Stars. I'm on the phone with Neil, who oh yeah, so Neil was at Manhattan School of Music at this point after Moonboot Lover, and then I called Neil. I said, man, I'm done with this, so we should start a band. So he left Manhattan School of Music.
Always corrupting his academic career.
I'm so bad, man.
Your temptation.
Oh God, I know. So anyway, so my wife and I, we head back. We drove cross country, and we met in Buffalo. Neil's there. It was right before Christmas of 90. That would have been 98. Yeah, 98. And all right, we're gonna start this band. Neil's like, I got someone who could be in the band, whatever. From I know. All right, cool. Well, we need a name. I was like, oh, we're just like coming up with stuff. And I remember being somewhere in the house, and I just heard Neil yelling, "Yo, I got it! I ran. I found Neil. He was like, Soulive. I was just like, oh, you mean that old name that we used to, you know? He was like, yeah, Soulive. I'm like, all right, cool. And that was it, you know, like, so it was recycled.
and when did Krasno get pulled into it?
Okay, so Neil and I decided to, and Kim, my wife, decided to move back to the Woodstock, New York area because we were familiar with it from our Moonboot days. Neil met a guy named Nick Mancini, amazing jazz music vibraphonist. He's like, yo, he should be in the band. So he came up to, I set up a recording studio and up in Woodstock. And yeah, we started recording, and Kim was, we were booking shows for us. And our very first show was in Boston at this place called Bad Girls Studios. Now, before that show, or I think it was even on the way to that show, Nick informed us that he wasn't going to be able to be a part of the band. He got a gig in a Broadway show in the Pit. So before our first show, we lost one of the members of a trio. so our first show at a place called Bad Girl Studios. So Eric. So we knew Kraz from back in the Moon Boot days because he always used to come out and see us play. And I always, one thing I remember about Kraz, he'd always have a tape with him that he was trying to have us check out. And it was always Lettuce. So, so Lettuce goes back further than Soulive. So anyway, so we get to the show, we're playing, and during the set break, Kraz walks up to us. Hey, yo, guys, what's going on? Like, I heard you were in town and you got this new band, and man, you guys sound great. And I'd love to sit in. Like, all right, cool, man, come on up. So Kraz sat in. After the show, he was bugging out. He's like, man, you guys sound awesome, blah, blah, blah. It's like, and at that point, yeah, I guess Nick let us know before that show because Neil and I had already decided we auditioned of a couple of guitarists. And we had a few more to audition. So I said to Kraz, like, hey, man, we have like some shows lined up like already. Would you mind coming down to our place in Woodstock, learning some songs and just fill in while we find a guitar player? He's like, yeah, sure, no problem. Because he was like in school at the time and he was trying to get into production. So he came down and it was March 2nd, 1999. And we started showing them some songs. He brought a tune to the table. March 2nd and March 3rd, he stayed overnight. We recorded 2 days, rehearsed, we'll say, but I was recording it anyway. And that ended up being our very first album, Get Down. So as we were listening to like the playback of things, we were like, wow, man, it all just happened. It all felt so good. It just fell into place. And then we were just a band. And we've just been doing it ever since, So, yeah, pretty wild.
What was like, do you guys talk amongst each other about what your ambitions were with the group and what your sound, what's the word I want?
Yeah.
What your sonic palette might be like?
Well, okay, I'll tell you, there's a few things. So when Neil and I were in Moonboot Lover, that was the first time I remember. That's so funny. That's when I met my wife, Kim. Way back, we've been together since 94. So back in Moonboot Lover, we were touring a lot, but we weren't like killing it, making a lot of money or anything. We were just like, crashing at people's places and just doing the early 20s road thing. One of our stops was Newmarket, New Hampshire. There was a place there called the Stone Church. And the sound engineer, Mike Matteo, really dug us and we formed a friendship. And whenever we would play in town, we would stay at Mike's house. And Kim, my wife, was one of his roommates. But that was the first time I heard Grant Green, Green is Beautiful, the album, and the Grant Green Alive. Matteo just had those like on a tape. It was the first time I ever heard like that. And I remember Neil and I were just fascinated. Like, we grew up listening to like, Jimmy Smith, Jack McDuff, down the line. But somehow, like Grant Green, that era of Grant Green didn't come through with the household. So it wasn't until later that we discovered it. And man, when we heard that, it just literally just changed everything. So whenever Neil and I were back in Buffalo, like after, we weren't on the road with Moonboot, we were down in the basement just playing Boogaloo, We have tons of like early recordings and Neil and I just playing Boogaloo. So when it came time, so there's that. And then I find myself in the Gray Boy All-Stars, who I had no clue who these dudes were at all. You know what I'm saying? Like, my old manager from Moonboot Lover called me up and said, hey, man, there's this band that's looking for a drummer. they're out in San Diego, and I wasn't doing it. I like kind of retired at the time. I wasn't, wasn't even playing music at all. And I was like, I don't know who these dudes are. He's like, oh, well, the sax player, he's the one who played the, sax solo on, he plays sax with Lenny Kravitz. I'm like, oh, I know those solos. I know. Okay, cool. Right on. So all of a sudden I'm out in San Diego playing with the Great Boy All-Stars, playing Boogaloo. I'm like, well, I know this stuff because I've been listening to it for a few years now, So
Al, just sorry to interrupt you, but I just got to ask, when you were with them, did you happen to play ever House of Blues in Hollywood? Not sure if it was that venue, but I'm thinking I saw the Great Boy All Stars open for maybe Average White Band or somebody, around that time, and I'm just thinking maybe you were there.
I remember playing in L.A. I remember doing the Hollywood Bowl with the All Stars back then. I definitely remember obviously playing the Belly Up. I'm trying to remember if I remember. I don't remember. I don't remember the It's possible. I don't remember though.
Okay.
Possible.
Just curious.
Yeah. So when it came time so Soulive really started in San Diego because I had my guitar with me, and the very first I was just writing, and I wrote Uncle Junior, one of our Soulive tunes, and I was like, man, this is cool. Like, and I literally was like, I can start a band around this song, and that's
the blueprint.
Yeah, that was the blueprint. So there was that side of it, the musical side of it, but there was another side which I kind of feel is just as important, or became almost important. When I was playing with Carl Denson, the Tiny Universe, one year we played back then we played the High Sierra Music Festival. And so that was 98. And the headliner that night was Maceo Parker. Mm-hmm. And so it was Maceo, Fred, Pee Wee, like that era of the band. And so, I don't know if you've been to the High Sierra Music Festival.
No.
But it's your classic like hippie music. I mean, it was the dustiest place on earth. It was just like, oh man, it was crazy. But I remember being out in the crowd, and just all these hippie bands are playing, whatever. And then all of a sudden, it was time for Maceo to come on. And Natasha comes up and starts introducing the band, I remember looking off to the right, and I could see Maceo and all those cats on the side of the stage before they come up. And I was like looking over, and by that time it's nighttime, the lights are on, and those dudes walked up on stage, and I remember them turning, and they had on black suits, the crispiest white shirts you've ever seen, black ties, and I was just like, the whole, they literally changed the entire vibe of the festival, like it was just like all of a sudden it was like I said, it's like a big hippie fest, you know what I mean? So like a lot of times you couldn't discern the band on stage from the people in the crowd, you know what I mean? It was just like but all of a sudden it was just like, wow, like they just changed everything, like changed the entire vibe, and I was like, I want to do that. So that was like the one thing when we started Soulive, I was like, we're going to wear suits. Like, like back in Moon Boot, we were like, I was not wearing suits. Trust me. You know what I mean? Like most time I didn't even have a shirt on. You know what I mean? Like I had like dreads and like, like no shirt. Like we were wild, And so, but then I was like, man, I just want to do that, because it was just like, there was just something about like how it made me feel as being a part of the audience. You know what I mean? It was like, I felt like I was witnessing something. I was a part of something special. You know what I mean? Like
professionals. Yeah.
Exactly. And again, the funny thing is, I mean, Neil and I grew up listening to all this jazz. We knew all the album. We knew that the deal, but to bring it into this world of, and so using our names from the moon boot days, because like, you know, that's when I met like O'Teal and Jimmy, like, you know, the Aquarium Rescue Unit. We were doing a lot of shows together. Like, so we kind of like brought, you know, all these, you know, all of a sudden it was like, oh, Al and Neil have a new band. And it wasn't like a jam band, you know what I mean? But it was like, so all of a sudden we'd show up, you know, we'd sound check and we're just in our t-shirts or whatever. And then next thing you knew, like we come out on stage and we're just wearing suits. Like people were just like, what the hell? I was like, that's awesome. That's what I wanted to. And it just grabbed people's attention, you know what I mean? So it was a combination of the music and just how we presented ourselves on stage. And also it was just like the time was just right. You know, like, I mean, Scofield came out with a go-go, you know, like Charlie Hunter was doing this thing, you know, so there was the MMW, you know what I mean? Like the timing was just right for us, you know, we just kind of lucked out, you know, right place, right time, you know? So.
Yeah. So you had the whole vibe. You know?
Oh yeah. Well, so the funny thing is, so on our way to our first gig with Kraz didn't have a suit. We stopped at Goodwill, and that's the thing. Like back in the day, like we were going through suits like crazy, but we were always shopping at Goodwill or, you know, Salvation Army. You know, that's like, you know, like it's so funny to look at photos of us not, you know, back then, like, oh man, that suit did not fit at all. You know, like, golly. So it was nice. Like once we signed the Blue Note, then all of a sudden we had like suits made for us. You know, we were definitely like up the game then. You know, but
wow.
Yeah.